Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Thompson along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
I'm doing, man. This preview is the one I was least looking forward to. And I'll explain throughout the show why I don't like going through the offensive line. But we're here now, and I'm with you. And now, as soon as I saw you, my energy got up for the show. So I'm ready to do it, man. Let's go.
That's right, because we like talking about large humans, and we're going to talk about large humans tonight. But before we dive into all that big, beefy goodness, make sure you check out our sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. You'll see the link in the description here for the show or on the podcast. If you download the Underdog Fantasy app and use the promo code Cover1, you get $25 free. Check them out. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to play around with it all season long. Aaron and I will talk about some of the fun player prop, parlays that you can do, whether it's a opponent the Bills are playing or Bills players. If you pick the right over/under combination, you can win like 5 times, 8 times, 12 times, 20 times your money if you do 3, 4, or 5 of them. So you can get rich. It's going to be great. Along with that, if you look around my head, you can see that we are very excited to welcome back our sponsors, Uncle Jumbo's, who are back with us for the 2021 season. So all the guys over there at Uncle Jumbo's, Nick and Chris and the whole Castritas family, you guys are awesome. Had an awesome wedding. If anybody
congratulations on the recent marriage addition to the family.
So super excited to be back on board with the guys at Uncle Jumbo's. You guys will see good stuff from them all season long, including a segment later on today. But first, the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills, I think you're a pretty good example of how a lot of fans feel about it. So maybe from a high level, how did you feel about this coming in as you were preparing and what you were kind of bracing yourself for?
Yeah, so let me start real quick by why I hate talking about offensive line, right? We've been at this long enough that every time we get a post game or even that week in review type stuff, I'm not good at evaluating offensive linemen. Guys like Eric, even Anthony Prohauska over at Disguised Coverage, much better at it than I am. Russell Brown, these guys are really good at it. Brandon Thorne. I have no idea what offensive linemen are supposed to be doing. I have no idea what offensive linemen are doing when they're doing wrong, except for the obvious, which is easy to see when you're watching film. The obviously things. Yeah, whiffs and things like that. So this one's hard for me to really I think guys are doing things wrong all the time, and it's actually not them. It's somebody else missing a block, or a play was changed at the line of scrimmage, and assignments got rotated, and one other guy missed an assignment. So it's a little too complicated for me to sit here and speak with authority on them. But as a fan, I'll tell you right now, looking at this offensive line, I was going into the show thinking, man, the interior offensive line was terrible all year long. I really liked what we saw on the edges, but not so much in the run game. There were some whiffs in the run game, especially for Williams. Mitch Morse had his problems, obviously, the additional concussion, the weird stuff in the year. Still feels like the team's not 100% in on Mitch Morse there. So kind of that big picture made me think, man, this is probably the weakest link positional group wise on the team. That got me to thinking that it's probably both lines, and that scares me. That's another conversation we can have. That in the trenches are probably the weakest spot for the Buffalo Bills, which I don't feel too confident in. But then, just like we were talking here offline, this was still a top unit. And this is what I tell myself about the defense all the time, right? Like, still a top 10 weighted DVOA unit. This was one of the top offenses in the NFL with this line. They're returning this line. They're returning their floor. So I got to pull back a little bit. Maybe that I'm overanalyzing then, that this is probably actually closer to an average, or maybe above average offensive line as a unit. And I'm just kind of overanalyzing it because it's our weak link. I think that's where I'm at.
I think that's spot on. I think that's exactly where a large portion of the fan base is. I think it's the easiest place to nitpick.
Right.
We'll get into it when we separate kind of the tackles versus the interior offensive line, where we maybe have good depth but not high level versus good high level but not great depth. I think we have a mix of that in the two spots. Right. And I think it's an easy part to see when the last taste in our mouth was, Chris Jones had a hell of a game in the AFC Championship game. That wasn't the case the majority of the season. And
that Baltimore game was a very nice game for the offensive line.
Correct. Right. And DeForest Buckner was controlled for a great deal of that Colts game. So obviously it's easy to think back to Bosa's game with the Chargers and Aaron Donald's game with the Rams and the ending with Chris Jones and think that, oh man, it was ugly, but you framed it up perfectly. They didn't shatter every offensive franchise record and put up 500 points because the offensive line was terrible. So it's an interesting one to look at. I do think there's areas we need to step forward into, but it's a good discussion to be able to go through. So let's start on the outside. Let's start with what I think is the easier discussion. The offensive tackles, we start with Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. We'll get to the young guys and the depth behind them. I think Deion Dawkins is underrated in the sense that I think a lot of fans think of him as maybe an average left tackle, and I think he's a top 10 left tackle. Now, I think he's in the more 8 to 12 range of that top 10. I'm not saying that he's, prime Tyron Smith or prime Trent Williams or anything like that. He's more going down the path, and don't get me wrong, people will try to aggregate this and take it out of context. He's not Joe Thomas, but he's more of the Joe Thomas level of good than the Trent Williams level of good. Trent Williams pancakes people and embarrasses humans and just has crazy highlight ones. Joe Thomas just didn't make mistakes, and you just didn't hear about him, didn't think about him. He did his job and always was there doing the right thing. Deion Dawkins is that kind of guy for us. He does his job. He does the right thing. He's not as flawless or as consistent as a Joe Thomas, but he's that kind of guy that just is always doing the right thing. And then I think last year added a little more of the strong finishes, the highlight level things, while increasing his consistency. I think he's very good. And I think that a lot of fans think of him as pretty good. And I think he's a little level above that. I think that we're fortunate that we locked up Deion Dawkins to the contract we did when we had a chance last summer.
Yeah, I agree pretty much across the board here. I think consistency is a great word to describe Deion Dawkins. And I think I agree that he's in that probably just above average. So yeah, 13, 12, 11. You can make an argument for me top 10 probably if we got into the weeds on it for sure. But I think the key is that he's gaining consistency and he's ascending. He's an ascending player at a premium position. He's still young. You talked about, he's not prime these guys, but he's not in his prime yet. He's still a young man becoming a guy that's going to play in his prime. Some of these offensive linemen aren't hitting their prime till late 20s, 30, they're really hitting their stride. So he's got a long way to go still, developmental, but he's been ascending pretty much this whole time. And it's really, to me, the one thing that's keeping Bobby Johnson in play as an offensive line coach, in my opinion, is that Dawkins has gotten better under his tutelage, and that's the one place where I've seen him actually coach up a player and develop a guy. We knew Darrell Williams was good before, so I'm not necessarily pinning that on Bobby Williams or Bobby Johnson that he brought that back. So the Bills, this is the best player along the offensive line. I think they're going to continue to build the offensive line along him and fill in other places, take shortcuts in other places. I think that's a good place to be. I think you're never going to have to pay Dawkins top. He's never going to be the best probably tackle in the NFL, but I think you'll get another contract out of him and keep him protecting Josh Allen. But the key is to get that somewhat controllable, because I think right tackle is more important than ever in the NFL, because now you're getting defenses with edges on. Like you can't just rely on the left tackle to protect your quarterback. Now that right tackle position is more valuable. And we're seeing with the contract, Williams was able to get that it's a valuable position. There's not a lot of teams that are able to get two tackles. So if you can get a guy like Dawkins and just have that locked down for a long time and only worry about the right tackle, that you can rotate that, continue to develop that. But at least you have one of them locked down here, which in Buffalo, I think for a long time.
So some of the words thrown out there when you said consistency, another element, he's never missed a game as a Buffalo Bill. Knock on wood.
Yeah, do that. I don't have any water.
He's never missed a game as a Buffalo Bill. He's played 16 games in every single season. And I think J.O.'s comment here is a common one. He took a definitive step back his second year when his rookie year, he had Eric Wood, Richie Incognito, surrounded by strong leadership and veteran voices. Took a step back his second year. I think people kind of hang on to that. The fact that he had the season he did last year, which was really, really strong and probably deserve to be in Pro Bowl discussions with a rotating door next to him that we'll get to, 3 different guys lining up for starting spots along the left guard. I think that really speaks to the step he's taken forward as a leader, obviously as a captain now, being able to do that. And I know Eric's done some awesome breakdowns of what Liam brought up here about his snatch trap move, where he gets you thinking that he's going to really push into you. The defensive lineman leans forward, he snaps him down, and then lands on top of him for a pancake. He loves doing that, and it's always fun to see when he can get somebody to fall for it. But, a lot of the show tonight will be spent on the competitions at the guard spots. We deserved a little bit of time to talk about our man Dean Dawkins and what a pillar absolutely. He is of this offensive line.
Yeah, and personality too, which I think matters to Sean McDermott. I think he keeps things light. He's one of the funnier guys in the locker room. That kind of stuff does matter. And he's a true competitor. If some of the things off the field that I think fans like, when you read the blog post, I forget what site that is, that allows the athletes to write, but it'll come to me at some point. But when he talks about how important Bills Mafia is to the team and stuff, I think he's created that connection with the fans. It doesn't matter on the field, but all that stuff is positive things for Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane as one of their, key picks of the Sean McDermott era, to have a guy that kind of like Trey White that just bought 100% into the process, 100% into his coaching staff, and he'll be a big piece of this for a long time. So I agree. I think maybe we need to start up the hype train to get Dion a little bit more hype around the Bills Mafia, man.
Yeah, Liam called it out. Players Tribune was the
Players Tribune. That's what it is.
And it was fantastic. It was really well done when he did that. And
I love hearing people tell me I matter as a fan, and that it's important to them.
Yeah,
I'll leave that up all day.
Yeah, he came across really well doing that. And, I think the pivot, the other side of the offensive line, his counterpoint on the right side with Darrell Williams, last year, it became pretty apparent through, what we were hearing that, okay, he's going to get the starting right tackle spot. A lot of us were kind of thinking, okay, maybe it's going to be a reclamation for Cody Ford, but I guess we'll give Williams a chance. I guess we still have Nsekhe. We'll give it a shot. And then he just went out there every week and did his job. It was pretty remarkable in the way that he was able to kind of get himself handled and put together for such a consistent run. And obviously we talked a bit about, at the midseason point, PFF had him there as their all-pro right tackle. I think he maybe settled in a little bit after there, but you think about some of those big games, that Sunday Night Football game against Pittsburgh where he completely eliminated TJ Watt. TJ Watt had virtually no impact in that game, which is remarkable for a guy who deserved to be right there with Aaron Donald for Defensive Player of the Year. Darrell Williams played very, very well. And, like everybody, there were, some flaws here or there. He's probably not quite as consistent as Dean Dawkins. Every once in a while, when he whiffs, it's because somebody beats him around the corner, and it's a very visible whiff. Like, it's easy to see when he has a miss. Luckily, there weren't very many of them. But there's a handful like that stick out. But, I think we're really fortunate. We got him back on a very reasonable deal. You talk about bringing back a guy who played as well as he did, and the Bills get him back for 3 years, $24 million. His cap hit never goes over $9 million, and this year it's only $6 million and change. That was a fantastic job by Brandon Beane to find the right matchup of a player who deserved to get paid a little bit but wasn't going to break the bank, and a team-friendly deal and structure. It was fantastic to bring him back at the number they did, and a very pleasant surprise they were able to bring back all the guys that they did. So certainly very happy with it, and I think that he's probably the right combination. If you're going to pay 2 offensive tackles, neither of which are at their rookie contract, re-signing Williams and Dawkins at the points they did are pretty much the only way you can afford to do that.
First of all, you disrespectful how you skipped over Spencer Brown as the starting right tackle. I've been told by the internet that
I've seen it on the tweeters. I've seen it on the tweeters.
I've seen it, so don't disrespect the Spencer Brown stands. No, I really love that they were able to bring him back. I remember these conversations that we were having for months of is Milano or Williams, and you're seeing the social media posts and retweet if it's Milano and all that. Able to bring both of them back. Again, maintains the floor. That's kind of my theme of this offseason. Maintains the floor of your offensive line going forward. A top offensive unit in the NFL. Offensive line floor is set. love him as a pass protector. Good thing our offense primarily is pass heavy. And
Yeah, when you pass 72% of the time, that works out.
Absolutely. But if I had to nitpick, and I think there's a lack of consistency, and primarily it's in the run game. And you said there the few whiffs, and I agree in the pass game, quite a bit in the run game that you see from him. Just kind of not really even necessarily knowing where to go. So I don't know if that was just a transition into the way the Bills were running last year. I don't know historically how he was, what type of systems that he was in the run game. So I don't know if it just took some getting used to. Hopefully that's a step forward that he can take this year, along with a number of other guys along this offensive line and run blocking. Because even though Brian Dable's not going to come out and change the tide of the ratios, run to pass ratios this year, I do think that they want to get better at that, and that's going to require guys like Darrell Williams stepping up. And again, we're not expecting him to become an all-pro run blocker, but getting it closer to average, for his position and limiting those whiffs and stuff like that. So hopefully we can see some progression from him. But to be honest, the thing that's the most troublesome is this is not a long-term answer at that position. I don't see necessarily a long-term answer with the type of depth that they have. It's going to be interesting to see if some of that develops into a long-term answer, but this might be a position where while you're waiting to develop, this is something that Brandon Beane has to kind of patch in and find the next Darrell Williams that's floating around on a roster somewhere. And, we'll get to the guard position, and maybe they got a guy like that, waiting in the guard position, but that's probably my biggest concern is, they're good, I think, for this year, but how long is Darrell Williams going to hold up, and how long are they going to be able to keep him here in Buffalo?
Yeah, and it's a little easier to project forward at offensive tackle. So Darrell Williams is 28. He'll turn 29 right before the season. So the 3 years he was signed for would be his age 29, 30, and 31 seasons. Right. That's very doable at offensive line. Like, that's a very standard age from an offensive line standpoint. So it's not a sure thing that he plays all 3 of those years, like everything that
probably
Brandon
2
Beane does.
I would think.
Yeah, he structures his contracts to give them an out, and they do. Going into that 3rd year, it's only a $1.8 million dead cap. You can save you can save about $7 million, $7.1 million that year to be able to get out of it if you need to. But if he's playing well, you still have a starting right tackle at under $9 million in a cap hit. So,
right.
Now the reason that comes up, and obviously the discussion in the chat, is that Spencer Brown and guys like that with him and Tommy Doyle are waiting in the wings. So we let Ty Nsekhe walk. He actually signed a pretty decent contract
the
for
Bates
the Cowboys.
Fans are going to be all over us for not giving Bates a shot.
I'm going to talk about Ryan Bates when it comes up. I'm going to assume that everything I've heard is that he is focused on being a center.
Okay.
And that I know everybody talks about, he could play all 5 positions, and that's great. He's not that good at any of the 5. But he has versatility in his depth, so we'll get to him. I'm not counting him as the swing tackle by any means. I'm assuming that it's going to be Spencer Brown, but someone will get mad at me for
I just
not
wanted to
properly
defend
respecting.
The stands. I'm just out here to help.
Mark appreciates it.
Yeah.
We'll go through and talk about it. I love the long-term potential of Spencer Brown. For anybody who listened to the series that Joe Marino put together, he had 10 different content creators put together their list of your top 10 most important Buffalo Bills for the future of the franchise. I think I was the only one or one of 2 that had Spencer Brown in their top 10. So for anyone, I think a couple people in the chat accused me of pretending like Spencer Brown doesn't exist. I very much know that Spencer Brown exists. I also know he played 1 year at Northern Iowa and then hasn't played in 2 years. So, 1, he's never played against high-level competition. He is a phenomenal athlete that, got thrown around a little bit at the Senior Bowl, and I love his long-term potential, but I don't want him anywhere near an NFL field in the 2021 season that involves protecting Josh Allen. Now, if he's the extra offensive lineman in heavy sets and he's the tackle eligible rolling out in those plays that Ryan Bates, was in the end zone waiting for a pass last year a couple times, that's fine. I don't want him playing in a meaningful snap at any point this year. And then if he shows so much athleticism and potential that next year, or more realistically, when you pointed out in 2023, if after 2 years of seasoning, NFL nutrition plans, NFL weight room plans, and getting him into the overall body chemistry and the body playing weight that they want him at, that's great. And I think that that's has potential to be something special. I don't want him near a football field this year, and I'm happy we have Darrell Williams re-signed to a 3-year deal.
Yeah, in my opinion, if we see Spencer Brown during the year, something's gone wrong. We talk about this all the time. Like if I see Antonio Williams, think something's gone wrong at that position, right? So if I see Spencer Brown, obviously things aren't going well for the Bills. I don't want to see him for 2 years. I think he's going to take a little bit to develop. And maybe next year can be the swing that you're confident in, that can come in and get some minutes if something goes wrong and you're not so worried. But yeah, you don't want to see him play right away, I don't think. And you want that to develop on its own. I don't think there's any reason to force him in year 2. I think you do have Darrell Williams under contract, which buys you a little bit of time in case it doesn't work out. And maybe you pay a little bit on the end there for Williams, but it's not too bad. So yeah, give this kid 2 to 3 years. That's going to be hard for Twitter. Anytime we see a whiff or a bad game, there's going to be people calling for this guy. It's the athleticism. It's super easy to fall in love with the freak athleticism. I get it too, but I think when you look at the full picture and you pull away from the athleticism a little bit and talk about the competition that he was up against, the lack of playing time against, like you said, elite players in NFL systems. Like, this is going to take time for him just to get his hands on the playbook and feel out what exactly the Bills are doing and learn how NFL linemen attack on the edges. We just talked about this not too long ago, that right tackle position is becoming super important in the NFL because you're having elite pass rushers line up on both sides of the line at defensive edge. There's a ton of teams that have really good pass rushers on both sides. The Bills are trying to develop that themselves here. So this is not going to be an easy job for this kid to step into. This is a big development. The chances are that he doesn't develop into a starting caliber player in the NFL with the type of school he came from, the background he's come from, the lack of experience. So for him to do that, he's going to have to really be the player that Brandon Beane thought he was and put in the time. And that's going to take some time on task, right? Like Sean McDermott loves to talk about.
Yeah, and it's something where I think the Senior Bowl is the perfect example. That ridiculous, athleticism, size, wingspan, 500-pound bench press didn't stop him from getting his butt whooped multiple times by experienced SEC defensive linemen who were ready with a mature, diverse pass rush skill set.
Things he hasn't seen, right?
Things he hasn't seen and prepared for. So all of those traits are why I listed him as one of the 10 most important assets on the entire roster going forward. I strongly believe in his ability to be able to make an impact on this team eventually. He's not ready to do that. And if he's on an NFL field in the 2021 season, it puts Josh Allen's health at risk.
Yeah. And I think that same we could kind of copy paste that statement for the remainder of the list at tackle.
Correct. For Tommy Doyle, Ryan Bates, anybody else there, if anybody else is playing offensive tackle besides Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams, something's gone wrong and we have a problem.
Josh to the other side.
Yes. Yeah. Extra tight ends, roll them away the other way. We have issues. Yeah. So it's tough because I don't mind the long-term structure of what we have. Most NFL teams,
if it plays out the right way.
Correct. Right, I'm excited that we haven't said the name Bobby Hart tonight. I see no reason that he should make this team.
Again, if he does, things are a problem.
Correct. Something has gone wrong. So being able to go through and structure it the way they have with 2 veterans re-signed to good contracts, 2 mid-round picks developing behind them, that's a smart way to structure it. I would love if we still had a Ty Nsekhe type veteran option at tackle there, but those are choices you have to make when you bring back both Darrell Williams and Matt Milano and add an Emmanuel Sanders. There's only so much room to be able to do that, and we'll talk about that. They made their choice where they were going to add more of the veteran competition. They chose to do it in interior offensive line, and they drafted at the exterior. So I think that they're in a solid spot. So we'll see where those things go. I think it's a virtual lock that we have 4 offensive tackles on the roster when it goes is going to be Deion Dawkins, Darrell Williams. It's going to be
Doyle
Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle.
Right.
And then if you counted Ryan Bates as a tackle, that would count. I do think Ryan Bates has a decent shot to make the roster as the ninth lineman, but I'm taking him by his word that he's focusing on the interior offensive line and playing center.
Right.
But he obviously, it's not impossible that they could kick him out, or we'll talk about the other guy who could kick out to tackle if we had an injury. One of those guys could come into play.
Yep.
So as we pivot into our next position, it will give us an opportunity to go to the interior offensive line. And with the interior offensive line, we have a chance to talk about a guy that both of us are much bigger fans of than many people may be, and that's our man Mitch Morse. If I were to ask the majority of Bills Mafia, how many games has Mitch Morse missed out of a possible 36 games in his career with the Buffalo Bills? What do you think most fans would guess?
This isn't fair because I knew when you asked offline, I did know the answer, but it's not fair because you did tell me. But I think people would think it's more. The answer is 2.
2 games. Mitch Morse has missed 2 games as a Buffalo Bill. He has played 34 out of a possible 36 games. And I think, obviously, there is a specter hanging over everything of what if he gets another concussion? What would that do? That is a legitimate risk. That is a real possibility. I think it's why you didn't see anything restructured in Mitch Morse's contract this year. They could have gone to Mitch Morse and tried to play around with his contract more than what they did, and it would have kicked additional money into future years. And they were careful not to mess around with too much of that and being able to push future money out where they would have no possibility to get out of his contract if they needed to. Because of, I don't see any real path where they're going to get rid of Mitch Morse because of performance. It would be because of the health side of it and because of the risk. So being able to look at that, I think the other question that would shock people is if I ask people how old Mitch Morse is, I think a lot of people would guess.
Old? Is he like old? You old?
He's not as old.
Close?
He's not that close. That's actually the key. That he's not nearly as ancient.
On the other side of the spectrum
is what I am. He's way on the far end of the spectrum. Mitch Morse just turned 29. Like, he's not some old man who's in his mid-30s. He just turned 29 and is now, heading into when many players are still playing very productively in the NFL. So, again, the fact that I think he's not as old as what some people think. He's played more games than what most people think, and that I understand the risk of what it is, and that, he's not the biggest center in the NFL. He's 6'6", but he's only 305. He's incredibly athletic. He's a great pass blocking center, and that it'd be great if he was also a monster road grader that just mowed people down. But he's really good out in space, and I know that's a piece that you like in his game.
Yeah, before we get to that part of it, I think the problem for a lot of folks is it's not that he gets hurt a lot; it's the type of injury, right? Like when we're talking about concussions, I think there's a lot of unknown out there. Even I try to stay in the know with what's going on with concussions, and it's hard. It's data that's changing, and we've heard his own opinion on it sort of change over the years. But where I feel confident is he seems to be okay. He seems to have done a lot of the research on this, and last time that he was asked about it in terms of his career, he felt confident that he had done some baseline testing, and nothing up to that point indicated that he was, heading towards any problems, or they didn't seem worried about it. He's gone to specialists, things like that. It seems like he's comfortable with it. And as long as he continues to be comfortable with it, he knows the risks. Like, us fans can sit here and talk about the risks of football and concussions and stuff like that. This guy knows. Mitch Morse is a very smart person. I think we think he's older than he is because since he's come in, he's acted like that immediate veteran leader along your offensive line, and he just plays the part of that old vet and just kind of that consistent presence on the offensive line for the Bills since he's arrived. I think he's very, people always put out those, and I fall trap to it too, of like, who are the underrated players from your team? And I always just say Poyer and Hyde. But you know what? It probably is Mitch Morse. People talk about Poyer and Hyde league-wide and talk about them with reverence, and it's just that the PFF doesn't. really give them, or some of these bigger outlets don't give them the credit maybe they deserve. But people league-wide talk about him, but you don't hear enough people, in my opinion, talk about Morse. And that you mentioned it. When we can get him outside, that's a really, as we talk about this interior offensive line more, my biggest issue, again, the run game with this offensive line. Not that I want to run more, I want to run better. And I would love to see more of that pin and pull action with Morse. Watching more Mitch Morse get out in space and block, his athleticism is so fun to watch, and to neuter him in the way that they have. And that's probably my biggest issue, is how Mitch Morse has been handled here over the last year. The way they handled him coming back off of that concussion, and nobody's still entirely sure what exactly was going on behind the scenes. Then we heard rumblings that he was going to be on his way out in the offseason. The Bills were going to move on from him, and it seemed like they weren't 100% behind him. If anything, I feel like this is maybe one of the worst things we've seen, how they've publicly handled him. It didn't fully get out of control and spill over into the locker room, but it seemed like usually this Bills message is packed nicely in a box and delivered to us. And the Morse thing got a little messy. It got outside the box a little bit. And that sent off some of the kind of what's going on bullshit hairs on the back of my neck. Like, something's not right, and I don't like this, because this is a player I like, and I don't like messing around with it. I don't like neutering him and not getting him out into space. So hopefully, in my opinion, that they do right by Morse, and they didn't in the offseason. One of the things I wanted the most was getting him some better guard play next to him, because I think it does an additional disservice to him, especially in the pass game, when he's got to lunge over because of a missed block or go help a teammate in those ways. I need them to support Mitch Morse, to get him to have a good year, because I don't think he's a top center. I don't think he's an all-pro center. I think he's in that next tier.
Yeah.
And if they can give him some of the support and get him playing to his strengths, I think he can be talked about in that way as maybe like a Pro Bowl caliber type center in this league, a top 10 center for sure.
Yeah, and I think that, the Bills need him to play that way. There's some good discussion in the chat, John, and a couple others talking about the Bills need him to play well, because in similar how we talked about, there's not a great option behind him at center. It
gets messy, right?
Do you move Feliciano over and force somebody to come in? Do you trust Bates to be ready at center? I think those are the two top options. Jack Anderson was practicing some at center, but he hadn't played that all through college.
Jordan Devey.
Yeah, I mean, there are some low-level options that we don't want seeing the football field. Yeah. So it's the only player on the Buffalo Bills whose primary position is center is Mitch Morse. So that's a challenge with anything that we're going to look at along those lines. So being able to do that, it's... Yeah, J.O.'s right. Morse can make the calls, but he can't make the blocks for the offensive guards. That brings us to our next spot. So we appreciate our guys over at Uncle Jumbo's. Excited to have them back for the Uncle Jumbo's Player Spotlight.
I got to go see them soon.
Of fun. Yeah. Be able to go check them out and have some fun.
Yeah. I was gifting friends of mine this weekend some extra Jumbos on their way out. I had a couple too many, and I was feeling good. I was like, here, take some Jumbos. And I went down to my base, and I was like, wait. I'm almost out of Jumbo.
I took a whole bunch down to the 4th of July cookout, and honestly was giving them out all over the place.
Every time
it was great. Everybody loved them. So by all means, go check out the Uncle Jumbo's. There's lots of good stuff right above my head. We saved we didn't save the best for last. We saved the most dramatic and most.
This is how my life usually goes. I save all the hardest. Things I don't want to do to the end.
Yeah, it's how all slackers work. It's just the way things go. Yeah. The Buffalo Bills offensive guard position. First, I want to start out with there is a higher floor than what I think many fans have prepared themselves for, because I think whoever the best two out of John Feliciano, Ike Bottker, Cody Ford, and Forrest Lamp is pretty good. I don't think that Jamil Douglas or Jordan Devey or Jack Anderson are going to make a push for a roster spot. Cyrus Tutele was a favorite of some undrafted free agent folks. I don't think any of those guys are going to be doing that. I don't think Tommy Doyle moves to guard. I know a couple of people asked about that. He's 6'8". Like that would be odd to move him to guard. But either way, I do think that whoever wins the competition and plays the best to keep their starting spot, we're going to be okay. And if somebody plays poorly, being able to swap in one of those other four at least has a safety net. The challenge is I don't know how high the ceiling is when John Feliciano is your highest paid guard. We paid Ike Bacher the RFA tender, which was $2.1 million. We still have Cody Ford on his rookie deal. He probably theoretically has the highest upside, but also has displayed the lowest floor and the worst performance level. And then Forrest Lamp, 38th overall pick, was an early second rounder, was also similar to like a Spencer Brown, an elite athlete that a lot of people loved the athleticism and the potential. He played really poorly for San Diego, and then actually as they moved to LA, he played less well, and then kind of bounced back a little bit and had some solid seasons. He played all 16 games and started all 16 games for them last year, but they let him walk, and he signed on a pretty cheap deal for the Bills. So I think that we have, there's some comments in here about John Feliciano. I think Mongo is a fan favorite because he's scrappy and sticks up for Josh Allen, and he hangs out with him and plays video games, is fun online. He gets his butt whooped way more than a guy that's supposed to be the toughest guy in the field than I would like. He gets bull rushed and just knocked on his butt way more than I would like to see that. So I like him. He's a fun guy. I wish he played a little bit better, more consistently.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Feliciano. I'm not high on Feliciano at all, and I know that it's not popular on Twitter. People don't like to. I think I get muted when I talk about it. But he is a fan favorite. I get it. It's okay. I think this has been my point here for 2 years, that him being the weak link along an offensive line is fine because he brings that extra something. I think that it matters. I don't know that it's going to ever show up on any PFF grades or anything like that, but that extra bit of toughness matters. That relationship with Josh Allen matters. So you can sell me on that, whatever. His play, I'm not sold on his play. If anything, if I'm looking at this guard room, the guy I'm most excited about maybe for 2021 is Ike Bacher. Like I think that he can win.
He probably had the highest performance peak of any of those guys last year.
Like he showed nice probably stretch. More. He probably showed the most. And if you can maybe unlock some consistency towards that peak, that he'd be the best guard on this team right now. If I had to guess going into this year, I think that he might be the best guard on the team going into it. I haven't seen anything really necessarily from Cody Ford. I know that's unfair. He's had a really odd career start for him, to change positions is difficult, to go through injury and rehab, very difficult things. It's not a knock on Ford necessarily. It's just that's a tough luck of the draw. Hopefully he can rebound from that and be the prospect that they believe in. Brandon Beane really believes in this guy. Like he's really set himself on this guy producing and being a long-term option on this team. I haven't seen anything to indicate to me that he's there yet. Hopefully through training camp and stuff, he'll overtake Bacher in that opinion, because I think he does have the highest ceiling along this group. So if he can start showing that ceiling, fantastic. Hasn't shown it yet. To me, Bacher's right now the guy that maybe I'm most excited about, and that's depressing, Greg. That doesn't make me feel good, and it's nothing against Ike Bacher. He's probably a adequate backup guard or most teams in the NFL, and that's okay. To be the best guard on this team, I want a little bit more. I wanted them to put a little bit more, invest in it next to Morse, invest in that center position. I know you've got the investments on the outside. You'll never have a perfect line, but I really was okay with that weak link being John Feliciano. Now I feel like you have not much of a huge gap and difference between Bacher and Feliciano, or maybe Ford, and that's two weak links in between, stuffed in between your good investments. And that one leads me to believe this is an inconsistent unit, and not a necessarily top heavy unit, but a unit that's probably, when it works out, right around average because of this interior.
So we've been pretty, negative or concerned thus far with the guard. So let me try to lay out what we would need to see in order to make a step forward and be able to see some performance improvement. So one, Ike Bacher had a nice stretch at one point. It was for like a 4 to 6 game stretch, and he would need to do that a lot more. We haven't seen that over any extended period of time. There's a reason that he kicked around on practice squads and was waived and then kind of protected and brought along slowly. We would need to see that much more consistently. John Feliciano is a pretty good run blocker and gets beat in the pass game way more than I would like. He would need to step up and be much more consistent in the pass game. Cody Ford has been injured both the last 2 years, has played 3 different positions, and has not really had a chance to settle in and play one spot consistently at a healthy level. But that's purely circumstantial and us telling ourselves that, well, there's a reason he was drafted, 38th or whatever to go through, and it would be something where we need to see it much, much more than what it has been to this point, because we're hoping that draft position pays off, because we have not seen it on the field. So I can tell myself a story where it does come up, and then Forrest Lamp, you're hoping for the same thing, basically. Hey, yeah. the draft pedigree, we buy low and bring a guy in on the cheap, and just like we did with Darrell Williams, you have a reclamation project that comes in and takes that and takes off.
Although reclamation assumes that it was once good.
Yeah. He never had the peak Darrell Williams.
We had to build it the first time.
Yeah, correct. He would need to simply, have his first debut to be able to step out there. But that's the path, is that you don't need all 4 of them. You just need 2 of them. We need 2 of those guys to take a material step forward and to be ready to go through and to take a look at those things. And
I'd argue you only need 1 of those guys to take a material step. If you got Bachner to play with consistency closer to his top level, or Mongo to get better impact, like if one of those guys rose above being equally weak links in that line and you could just boost it just a touch, they're close. Go look at that video that Jo mentioned it here, that Anthony and Eric did on the offensive line with the run game problems. It's close. There's a lot of plays that are close. It's not a bad unit, even though we're kind of nitpicking here in the guards. The improvement doesn't have to be massive, in my opinion, and it only has to be one of them. I just need one guy to step up and play better than they did a year ago, continue to progress, and I think that you would see a big improvement, especially in the run game.
Yeah. John was asking about my comment about John Feliciano. I'll give you 3 games. Go look what Jaron Reed did to him in the Seattle game. Go look what Shelby Harris did to him in the Denver game. And go look at what Chris Jones did to him again in the Kansas City game. He gave up 4, 6, and 6 pressures in those 3 games. And they were abominable in those positions. And like I said, he had other good games. He was a pretty consistently good run blocker. Sure. But when you're passing the ball 72% of the time, we need somebody who can protect the pass more. That doesn't do us a ton of good when we're running the ball 28% of the time.
Yeah, especially the NFL nowadays, where defensive linemen are interchangeable. You're getting edge rushers coming in. Like, I don't want to see a quick, twitchy Aaron Donald type or an edge rusher against Mongo's feet. Like, his feet, he's not going to be able to do that. And that's where the NFL is trending. So you need a little bit more athleticism right now than what the Bills have there at that position, because they're also not some power run scheme team that's running the ball down people's face. They're not getting in.
And that's not where they should be leaning. That's not what they should be working towards. They obviously have found very clearly what works, and that they have an exceptional passing game, and that they have 2 exceptional pass blocking tackles who are better at pass blocking than they are at run blocking. They have a very good pass blocking center who's better at pass blocking than they are at running. And then they have a mixed bag at guard where Feliciano's a better run blocker than he is pass blocker. Cody Ford is theoretically a better run blocker than pass blocker.
Technically,
but he's not that good at either. We're hoping Forrest Lamp can take a step forward. And then you have, I think John or someone in the chat described it, that Ike Bacher is the definition of average, and he's probably not even average. Like he's probably below average. He's just our below average was as good as we could hope for.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
So overall, when your weak spots are guard and your strengths are tackle and center, that is the better spots to have weak spots in the NFL. Like if you're going to pick the ranking in the order of which you would want the strength of your offensive line, you would probably pick left tackle, right tackle, center, then the 2 guard spots. So the Bills are built in the least risky way possible when you have weak spots. If you're going to have weak spots, you want to have interchangeable depth to compete. Well, they did that. The Bills have interchangeable depth to compete. They have guys who can come in and that they're not going to miss a beat if they have to swap in Forrest Lamp for Cordy Ford, if they have to swap in Ike Bacher for John Feliciano or any other combination, or if Feliciano needs to step into center, his versatility does matter. His versatility is valuable. So there are benefits to what they're doing here. The key is, can we get health? That top five of Deion Dawkins, Cody Ford, Mitch Morse, John Feliciano, Darrell Williams never played one snap together last year. There was always someone missing from that group to be able to do that. So what they need is to have some health through training camp, get a solidified top five together, figure out who that is, and then hope you can keep that together and gel with, the fourth year of most of the players coming together here, the third year in this offensive system, solidified, continuity in the rest of the offense and the language that's being used. Hopefully that can then benefit with where they're going from the rest of the guys together.
Yeah, and bring back the pin and pull more often.
Yeah. Yes, honestly, no, seriously, getting more into that than what they had in zone. And, for anyone who didn't see it, the show that Eric and Anthony did talking about how they lean more zone and how they went that way, part of that is when you don't have preseason and you don't have a full OTAs and minicamp, it's easier to teach zone. It's easier to implement that. So I'm hopeful that we're able to lean back into what we were good at with that pin and pull, and we'll see more of that as we go.
Yeah, and it's a preferred for Brian Dable historically to run stuff like that. And they've had success, and we saw success with Singletary with that, and we saw success for the offensive linemen. Yeah, I think ultimately it's an about average group.
Yeah.
I think
with above average at the right spots.
Above average at the right spots. My concern is, and this was it kept popping up in my head as I was going through the show, and this is more of a look at the team, not just this unit, is I say all the time, and we talk about all the time, games are won in the trenches. That's especially in the playoffs, and we saw the Ravens game. I think the Bills won in the trenches in that Ravens game, and it helped them to win that game. I think they got blown out in the trenches in that Kansas City game on both sides of the ball, and I think that showed in the final score. And I think that's what's happening to this team is they have everything set up for success at all the right places, but one of the key fundamental things for me of winning football games that matter is winning in the trenches. And I don't know if they've got the units to do that. And I think that's the Achilles heel right now. This really good Buffalo Bills team is that I don't know that they can dominate on either side of the line with consistency or long enough stretches to really make that type of event, to be that unit that makes the impact to take over a game, especially in the playoffs. So that's my big concern, is that they've got it all. Everything else is lined up right, but I'm a little bit concerned when we're looking into these units that these ones might not be up to par enough to get over the hump that they need to.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to monitor. It's going to be one of the more interesting things to be able to look for as we head into training camp, as we head into the rest of the off season. It's one of the areas, right, with return job, that those are the top two that I want to see, is our CB2 battle between Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, and then our return jobs, and then the interior offensive line. Those are the jobs that we want to see to be able to go forward. And if you haven't seen very much, make sure you're checking out the work by Rob Quinn. He did an awesome article on players on the hot spot. It's all the guys I just rattled off. It's can Levi Wallace hold on to his job? Can Cody Ford hold on to his job? Can Devin Singletary hold on to his job? And where are those things going to go as we head into the offseason here. Aaron, where can the good people find you?
These days, not on the internet, man. I haven't been able to be on as much as I'd like. I was just telling you, I'm not in the Slack channel as much as I'd like to be, not having my computer open. But you can find me over at Aaron Quinn 716. But more importantly, you can find me here every Wednesday. We're wrapping up this, positional preview. Going to get training camp's coming. I can see it on the horizon on my calendar. When I flip the calendar heading into July, I could see the little spot that I marked training camp. We're getting close, Greg. This is wrapping up. We're getting to real football.
That's right. As we go forward here, make sure you check out some of the work we have going on. We have Anthony Prohaska and Disguise Coverage. You have the guys at the Hoof coming back here soon. We're going to be debuting a new podcast as we get ready for training camp coming up on the 26th. You guys are going to be excited to see that. And we've also started a new fantasy podcast. You can come over and check out myself and Anthony with a new friend, Rich Haynes, and going through and talking about fantasy football and getting you ready for your fantasy drafts. Along those lines, make sure you're checking out Underdog Fantasy. You have the show description with the link to be able to download. Use the promo code Cover1. Get yourself $25 free to play around in there. Prove that you're far smarter than myself and Aaron and all the people over here. It's a fun competition to be able to go through and to be able to show what you can do. So make sure you have some fun there as well. We're going to be continuing on with the off-season position preview series. So we'll be getting into running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, all the rest of the offense, leading you all the way up to training camp, and then talking about the best storylines as we get into that training camp and all the competitions there. So we will be with you each week, keeping you up to date and getting you ready for this Buffalo Bills season. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.